Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right, so let's get started today. Thank you for being here. I know it's toward the end of the day, and you're pretty tired with all the content being thrown at you. So today's session, I wanted to start off with this stat. 75% of Gen AI projects fail. I know you're going to say, yes, I have seen these stats before. I have seen 60%, 95%, but this is a number that Gartner has published. And what this number is showing us is that any Gen AI projects, if there's 4 companies that are starting a Gen AI project, 3 out of the 4 is going to fail. And why is that, right? What is the reason behind that? It's mainly, it's not due to the models being ineffective or the algorithms not working. It really comes down to the backbone of AI. As you walked around, I'm sure, the exhibit hall and you talk to different speakers, you listen to different things, you picked up that everyone is talking about data being the backbone of AI. And obviously that is the case, right? We have been saying that for a few years now. But one thing that I have noticed from the sessions that I have been to and different speaks that I have done and the research I have done is that we often just stop at that. The data is the backbone for AI, Gen AI to work. Then how come it's still not working? Everyone's got tons of data, right? So why is it not working? So what we have found is that if you really peel the onion, behind data, there's so many things that go into prepping the data to make it ready for Gen AI. And one of those things is the ability to bring it all together, right? There's multiple names for it. Some people call it matching, some people call it identity resolution, some people call it entity resolution. So in today's presentation, I'm going to refer to it as entity resolution. So what we are seeing is that fragmented data that sits within our organizations is the main reason why Gen AI isn't really working or it's not taking off as expected by the boards, by the executives. Companies are still struggling to make sense of it. And when that happens, there's a lot of finger pointing and blame that comes as a part of it. We invested millions of dollars. Why is this agent not performing as we expected? Why is this product not behaving the way we expected? Why is that customer not happy with our chatbots when we are trying to help them? And that happens to be the main reason, the fragmentation of data, because data comes from a lot of sources. And if we don't try to stitch it together, get it connected, we're going to continue to struggle with it. So that's what we will talk about today to understand what can we do to make that work for us. What can we do so that we are that 1 out of the 4 where Gen AI and the agents and different things we're trying to do with AI actually works for us. Let me start with a very simple example just to set the ground, baseline for what entity resolution is. First of all, how many of you heard about entity resolution? What entity resolution? Just a quick show of, okay. How about matching? Okay, so there's a couple more hands. So entity resolution, matching, deduplication, there's multiple names that this is known as, but at the crux of it, it's really the ability to bring data together. So connecting data that either refers to the same entity or somehow is related to that entity is the process that entity resolution helps us with. In this very simple example, I'm using my name. And if I am a customer of an organization, my name could be stored as Gripinder Dillon at 123 Main Street, right? Or it could be stored as in another system, G. Dillon. Some systems might just store it as Dillon. My friends call me with the nickname, so if it's someone who's trying to personalize it for me, they might store it as my nickname, right? So there's multiple ways to do it, but at the end of the day, it's one record, one entity that they're referring to. And that's what entity resolution really helps us with. And one personal example I always like to share when I do this speech is my previous organization. I had a boss, and there were 2 of us, of Indian descent, me and then another person. We didn't look anything like each other. I wear a turban, as you can see, and the other person didn't. So he always referred to me as him, no matter how many times I corrected him, right? So again, we are very quick to blame the AI that, AI is hallucinating, it's not really understanding. But if you really think about it from behavioral perspective, humans are not any different. In fact, I would argue that it's easier for us to train AI versus a human behavior, change a human behavior, right? So I think that's good news for us that we are leaning toward using AI to help us with our tasks And that's good because we have a bit of control over that. Versus if you were trying to use people and trying to change their behavior and perception, I'm sure you can't get them to not hallucinate. They will often, time after time, get things wrong or do things that they're not supposed to. So that's one good story, and that's where entity resolution I tried to tie in, is that I had given him all the details multiple times. I still couldn't train him, no matter how many times we tried to resolve that. But with AI, if we do it right, we can do this right. And here's another example in the context of business, just a little more complexity added now. So in this case, very, very common example of how data is stored within an organization. So you have a CRM system where you store customer information, like the sales information. You have a web form that's coming from the marketing system for your leads. And then you have a support ticket, which is in your support system, which is being stored to help an organization. And what I have seen, I have spent a lot of my career in data management, MDM, AI. And what I notice oftentimes is that the data is stored differently. It's the same customer, but it is stored differently because it's being entered by sometimes humans, and you make mistakes. So the name changes or the address changes, a letter is off here or off there. And if we don't really put the effort to resolve that information, to correct that information, to help us understand that the John Smith that I'm talking about here is the same John Smith, which is listed in 3 different ways in my systems, then we're going to have problems, right? You could have marketing to John Smith as a prospect, even though John Smith is a customer. And in fact, one of my other companies, we did that. We launched a product where we had issues bringing data together, and we marketed to our customers as prospects. So the result obviously wasn't pleasant because they were very angry that we did not know that they were already a customer. So a lot of that has happened, and in fact, in my research that I did a couple of years ago, I found that typically companies spend on average $2 to $3 million on lost revenue because of the data issues, the quality of the data, the fragmentation, and not knowing who they are marketing to. And the reason for that is obviously the marketing cost, right? The money you're spending. And the second is the reputational damage that comes part of it. And then the third is you're offering them discounts that shouldn't be offered to them because they're new customers, right, or existing customers. So all those things add up and it turns into millions of dollars. And entity resolution is a capability that could help us solve those problems. So why is that necessary for GenAI? Well, 3 things. It ensures that your AI knows who is talking about. We talked about that, right? So the experience that you're trying to generate, entity resolution is going to help us get to that experience because it'll know that this is the customer that I need to take into consideration for my training data, and this is the customer that I also need to take into consideration for my campaigns as a part of my predictive analytics. It supports explainability and compliance. There's a lot of emphasis right now on transparency and understanding where this information is coming from GenAI. So having that information, when you know that you can drill down and see that customer A is the same as customer B because of this. That's what entity resolution capabilities will allow you to do. And it enables faster time to insight, and it's very scalable personalization because now you already have the backbone of this done. It's going to help you, create that personalization experience that you desired to do. So those were the 3 key things. There's obviously other benefits of it, but those are the 3 main ones from AI perspective that it's going to help with. As you saw from the brochure, the title of this session, right, is the architecture. So how do we architect it in a way that we can use entity resolution to help us with AI, help AI work? So there's 3 patterns that we'll briefly touch upon that I have seen work really well. One of them is the streaming ingestion. So if the use case is that you have data coming in real time, what can you do to resolve entities? So we'll talk about that as real-time entity resolution. Second is entity-driven processing. So this is ER as a service. You only use ER as transactions are coming in, or you're trying to use ER to match records on as-needed basis. And then the third, which is very common these days, is data fabric and mesh. Right? So a lot of people are using fabric or mesh. How does entity resolution architecture fit in that space? So we'll talk about these 3 briefly. So let's start with the first one. ER as a real-time service. So in this case, going back to my previous example, so you have the CRM, you have the web leads that are coming in, you have the transactions that are being fed from other systems. You have the need to match that data to your existing database, existing data sets you might have. So in that case, you could have two ways to do that. You could have data ingestion queue set up when the transactions from those real-time systems are coming in. You're pulling those into this queue for ingestion, and then you're passing it over to central ER service, which could be an API, it could be a platform that you're setting up, an application, so that information is being fed real time to that. It will look at that information, it will match it to what it's already got in this repository, whether there's a link to that new data coming in or not, and it will give you a response back, which then goes into your downstream system. So that's the resolved entity store, right? So once it resolves that this is the real entity or this is a new entity, it stores that information in the resolved store. Now, the use case I already explained, it's really good for applications that require immediate identity context, such as fraud detection systems, personalized offers that marketing may be sending out to customers based on the lead coming in real time, or creating a 360 dashboard for your internal teams to really support that customer. So those are the three key use cases that I have seen work in. And the benefit, obviously, is it decouples entity resolution or identity resolution from the GenAI models. I'm using these synonyms because a lot of people use different names for it, but at the crux of it, it's entity resolution. So that's the first architecture. The second one is event-driven processing, or ER as a service. So very similar, you could have the same sources, but instead of the data coming in real time, there could be events set up. So for example, your marketing system, you might architect it so that it comes in at every night. It sends all the requests over to the entity resolution capability or service. Then it processes it for the system and sends it back. Right? So, and then after that happens, the ER service obviously delivers the information back. It goes back into the downstream systems, and you do whatever needs to be done with the information. So this is good in architectures that require trigger workflows, such as I don't need to do a real time, but I am detecting, the system is detecting that there might be possible fraud, so it's going to create a trigger for this capability and say, hey, ER service, can you identify whether this person that I'm getting the signal on is the person that we already have in the system, or is their existing customer, or a prospect, or someone else? So that's that. And then the benefit of this is really going to be it provides scalability. So when you do real-time entity resolution, as you can imagine, there is a lot of stress that you're putting on the system. There's compute, there's all the volume that you need to handle. But with this, you are sort of throttling it, and you're only doing it on as-needed basis. So this creates a more scalable and more manageable system for entity resolution. Still works as effectively. And then the third one is ER as a data mesh or a data fabric. So in this case, there's two different models that could apply in this case, right? So you would have the nodes, or you would have the centralized hub, right? So for example, your sales organization might have their own platform for entity resolution because they're only dealing to resolve marketing-related data or sales-related data. So they're doing entity resolution there for as-needed basis to make it more scalable and quick. And your ERP team could have the same thing. So you're replicating this within different organizations depending on the maturity of your organization. But one thing to keep in mind here is that you still have a centralized repository. Even though marketing is kind of acting as a siloed data management capability, ultimately the data is still being resolved to your overall enterprise data asset. It could be a part of your data lake, it could be a part of your data architecture, database, or whatever mechanism. It could be your internal cloud. So it's storing that information centrally, but you have these hub and spoke type of thing where the individual organization or department is doing the resolution, but then it's also checking and feeding it back to the centralized. And why is that? What is the reason behind that? Well, one main reason for that could be, you want to make sure if marketing is adding a new customer or sales is adding a new customer, that entity is also stored in the enterprise warehouse. So that next time your ERP system or your support system needs to do something, it could quickly check and get the information back, and it's resolved. So that's That's the benefit of that. And it helps you balance that autonomy, right? It gives you control locally, but it also helps you, keep that global consistency as well. This really just sort of chimes in on the Gen AI aspect of it. So when it comes to Gen AI, you could have different architectures coming into play, right? So the three that we talked about, you could use any of those depending on how you're creating generative AI applications or agents. But the main point here is that you need some sort of a real-time capability because generative AI is going to be working in real time. So some of the models we talked about, some of the previously done entity resolution capabilities where you only do it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and some customers even just do it on a quarterly basis. That doesn't really work because your Gen AI is acting as a person for your organization, so therefore you need to have access to do this in real time, and this is the architecture that works best for that case. We already touched a bit upon that. So what are the applications across different sectors that would be a benefit from this capability? So you have the financial services. Fraud detection is a key one that we work with. There's a lot of data that is being generated. There's a lot of trends that are being picked up by systems. So having an ER capability is beneficial there because you can tie it to the person. Is this the right person that the fraud is being detected on, or is this the right person that you're marketing to based on the information that you're getting from different signals via different systems? Public safety, threat detection intelligence, so this is very popular in government as well. And what we see there is that they need to be ahead of the curve as we can imagine, right? So anytime there's any threats externally that are being detected, they need to have capabilities or systems that can quickly bring it all together so that they can make immediate decisions to diffuse that threat that might coming from different types of bad actors. And then digital platforms, identity graphs, customer 360, that's picking up steam as well. So entity resolution is the key capability behind the scenes to get to that 360 view of a customer, prospect, or a supplier. So this is just an example of a regulatory compliance use case. So a problem in this case, this is a real example that we have come across. The problem in this case is that this was a financial services organization. They needed to understand their customers, so knowing their customers, the KYC use case, and they had to prevent fraud and money laundering as a result of it, right? So in order to do that, you really need to know your customer. But they had a lot of data. They had about 20 to 30 different data sources that the information was coming from. It was fragmented, it wasn't complete. So they were spending a lot of time. Traditionally, some of you may have seen MDM being used for that, right? So you're trying to stitch information together through your MDM platform. In this case, it wasn't working because MDM is very static. They needed information stitched together in real time. So in this case, what they did was they deployed the real-time architecture that we talked about. So anytime there was, because this was a very important KYC use case, they needed to immediately know who this customer was that the threat was being detected for, so they could make some decisions and prevent that money laundering use case. And the impact was they enabled automated compliance checks as a result of the entity resolution in real time. That prevented them from losing money and also creating audit trail, which allowed them to be transparent to say, for this customer, we did this, we blocked it because of this, this, this. This helps them, obviously, as a part of the privacy and compliance requirements to create that audit trail so they could justify their actions. And a good ER system, I should mention also, you're seeing a score here, trust score. When you are using entity resolution, there's multiple flavors of it, but I would say a good entity resolution capability should give you some level of confidence. Why is it creating that link? Why is it saying that this John Doe is the same as that John Doe, right? So there's various attributes that it would go through to create that match, but as a result of it, it should give you an indication as to what is that level of confidence. So that's what you're seeing as the confidence or trust score here, 0.92. That it's 92% confident that this is the same John Doe that this system and this system are talking about. So that is very essential when you're creating entity resolution. Partnerships come into a huge play. Not a single organization is often is unable to do a proper entity resolution or get a 360 view of a customer, you often need to work with other vendors. So there's, you'll probably see some vendors here on the floors here, but these are the third-party vendors that could help you with additional information. So you could get, for example, if we go back to the KYC money laundering use case, you could go to a vendor which gives you the sanctions. Are these companies that you're dealing with, are they on this on the sanctions list? Are there any other fraudulent activity that you can understand from other suppliers that provide credit ratings or payment type of information that could be useful for you? So keep that in mind when you're trying to build this entity resolution framework and a referential data source framework, that partnerships become a good component or a good thing to consider as a part of it. There's integrators that could be helpful as well if you're trying to embed capabilities into your platform. I get asked this question a lot. Why is, can we do this through MDM? Is MDM not enough for us to do entity resolution? I would say if I were doing this talk 2 years ago, I would say yes, MDM is enough, right? Because what MDM is designed to do is to help you bring data sources together and create that golden view of the record. But what has happened with the evolution of GenAI and agents is that MDM is very static. There are organizations, MDM platforms that are evolving just because of the sheer time it takes to implement MDM platforms, to make changes to it. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years and a lot of investment. So I would say MDM alone today isn't sufficient for us to accomplish this GenAI use case when it comes to truly understanding the data that feeds your GenAI agents. So we have to look for other ways to do that and then complement our MDM capabilities. So obviously MDM isn't a total throwaway. There's a lot of good capabilities and components of MDM, but I would say consider adding, enhancing, complementing the MDM so that you can do some real type of entity resolution and resolving as a part of it. And then finally, we're coming, we have about 7-8 minutes, but I wanted to wrap up a little early so we could, if there's any questions, we could talk about it and get your thoughts as well. So from this whole discussion and what I have done from my research perspective, the key takeaway I would say is that, remember the 75% number, right? So 3 out of 4 is still a valid number that Gartner recently published, are the number of projects that would fail. So that puts us, that 25% odd to be successful. And to do that, we need to be very smart with our approach when we're talking about Gen AI and AI. Often we get distracted by the shiny object. I listened to a couple of talks here, even on the floors, which said, agents are so easy to do. It's, you can put it in action within 30 minutes. But the real crux of it, the problem is the work that needs to go behind it. I often say in my discussions is that when you're thinking about any technology, Gen AI, think about people, process, data, and technology. It's never just one thing, right? So you have to keep that in mind, that the process has to be placed, and then you need to have the technology or the application to support it for it to be successful. And then trust starts at that entity level as a result of it. So ultimately, data is what makes Gen AI successful. And in order to make data successful, we need to make sure that we have high quality data. How do we get to high quality data? We need to bring it all together, remove the incompleteness, the fragmentation, so that our system really knows who it's talking about. ER is a critical component of scaling Gen AI responsibly. Already talked about that, so I won't spend too much more time on that. And then finally, embedding ER into your applications so that you can get the insights that you need for your AI to work. You can reduce risk depending on your use case, and then unlock the innovation that your organizations are investing in. And then I think with that, I would like to thank you for your time and listening to me. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer a couple of questions. This is my LinkedIn, if anyone knows that. Yes. Thank you. Oh, you need the microphone? No, it's okay, I can hear you. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So let me repeat the question. So the question was, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. So the question is two-part question. So one is, what are the approaches to start entity resolution? And then second part was, with our GDPR constraints, sometimes you're not allowed to do that, right? So how do we do that? So the first question, first part is, entity resolution, the process to start with is really just as soon as you realize that you're going to be dealing with data that's coming from multiple sources, start thinking about entity resolution, right? And entity resolution could be as simple as if you have, let's say, two sources. You need to bring those two sources together, right? So a lot of people use different applications. There are tons of applications available. So you can talk to some folks on the vendor floor. Obviously, we're one of the sponsors, and we do entity resolution, as you can pick up from my talk. So we can help you with that, right? So it's really goes into the second piece, which is GDPR, and you're absolutely right. You can't really send your data to other companies. So what we have done is our approach is very different. We actually have created an SDK, which we have no visibility into the data that's going into it. It sits all behind your firewall within your cloud. We basically help you deploy this SDK, and then you are off doing whatever you need to do. So there's no real constraint from GDPR perspective because you're in charge of your data, right? So the process, again, is to start researching and seeing what's going to help you, what kind of architecture you're looking for, and then finding the application or the service that'll support that. And we have a booth if you want more information. It's right across 139. Happy to give you more details after the session.
Hi, thank you. If you have like a non-real time entity resolution model, I say for example for a single customer view for marketing campaigns and things like that, how difficult is it to take that into a real time scenario? I mean, how much money do you have to throw? I mean, is it an exponential cost to move it into that environment?
Great question. So if you have, depending on the sources, right, how many sources are coming in, that you're going to be taking real time with your entity resolution. So I would say, I have seen it get implemented from batch or static to real time within a couple of weeks, depending on the maturity and the size of the organization and the number of sources, to sometimes it takes a couple of months, in my experience. So it's not a huge task because of all the technology that we have available in the platform. It just makes it easier now for us to do that. I can delve into more details for you if you want to just stop by, because we're going to run out of time, but my short answer is that depending on your use case, it could be a couple of weeks and $100,000, $50,000 to a couple of months, depending on your level of sophistication, how many systems are going to be using it, how many systems are going to be feeding it, right, depending on that. But the capability for entity resolution is going to be the same.
Hello. Quick question regarding, basically I have two questions here. First about the ER resolution which you're doing here with GenAI. Like, how trustworthy are they, like, the outcome of it? Like, I mean to say, has to, GenAI, the way it works, it's sometimes really being a questionable debate, like, can we trust that?
Yeah.
Firstly. And second question is about what the lady asked me before me about the GDPR.
Yeah.
Now, yes, I do understand that we are like, what you're proposing here is some kind of internal systems here, but there is something more on GDPR, not just about hiding data, but also about forget me, for example.
Yes.
So GenAI when steps in, how do you make sure that those things, whatever the governance side of it, is also being in compliance with the regulations?
Got it. Okay, so let me answer the second part first. Second part was the GDPR and forget me first, right? So basically from entity resolution's perspective, all it's doing is whatever data sources are coming in, it's going to match it for you, right? So, and what I'm saying here is that not to use GenAI for entity resolution. What I'm saying is using entity resolution to help you with GenAI, creating GenAI capabilities. So I would never recommend using large language models to do entity resolution. So no, don't do that. Because that's going to be a huge problem because you can't explain it. And the fact that some of these models are contextually so good, they're going to make you believe that what they're doing is right. I have come across that as a part of my testing. I did testing for OpenAI. So no, they're not working for data management. So my whole speech here is that using entity resolution so that you don't fall into that trap of GenAI creating a black box scenario for you. When it comes to GDPR, the data that you are feeding into entity resolution, you should have the rights and controls to that. So if you do that, I think that's good. But when it comes to forget me or take me out, then your entity resolution system, once you feed it next time, it should be able to basically come back and say, I don't have any link to that because you took that information out, right? So it's not going to be able to match to that. So that capability needs to be a part of that process. Do we have more time or are we out of time? We're done. Okay, all right, thank you so much. We're out of time. Again, we have a booth. If you have any follow-ups, you can ping me. This is my email contact. Thank you.